Long before the jingle of coins filled a market stall, the people of ancient Denmark had their own ways of doing business. This was a world built on barter, a direct exchange of goods and services. Imagine a farmer on the Jutland Peninsula. He has a surplus of good, strong wool from his sheep. He needs a new axe head, something sharp and reliable. He wouldn't reach for a purse. Instead, he would find a blacksmith. They would talk, they would haggle. Perhaps a bundle of wool, maybe two, would be traded for the finely crafted tool. This system was personal, built on trust and the tangible value of the things people made and grew with their own hands. This was a landscape of practical trade. A fisherman with a good catch of herring could trade his salty bounty for grain from an inland farm. A skilled carpenter could exchange a well-made chair for pottery or leather goods. Life was a constant negotiation. Value was not abstract. It was right there in front of you. It was the weight of a sack of barley, the warmth of a fur pelt, the strength of a wooden shield. People traded what they had for what they needed. It was simple, direct, and it had worked for countless generations. It was a system that bound communities together, creating networks of reliance and mutual support across the land. Amber, the gold of the north, was another crucial part of this early economy. This beautiful, fossilized tree resin washed up on the shores of the Baltic and North Seas. It was light, easy to carry, and highly desired far beyond Danish lands. It was a luxury item, traded south along ancient routes, eventually reaching the great civilizations of the Mediterranean. In return, other valuable goods flowed north. This wasn't just local barter, it was Denmark's first taste of international commerce. Amber was a natural treasure that connected people of the north to the wider world, a gleaming golden link in a chain of trade that stretched for thousands of miles. But the barter system had its limits. What if the blacksmith didn't need any wool? What if the farmer, with grain, had no need for fish? The system required a coincidence of wants where both parties had exactly what the other desired. It could be clumsy and inefficient. Trading live animals was even more complicated. How many chickens is a cow worth? And how do you make change for a pig? These challenges were a part of daily life. They showed a growing need for something more flexible, something that everyone agreed was valuable. To make trade smoother and more predictable, the stage was being set for a new kind of wealth. As society grew more complex, a new form of wealth emerged, one that glittered with status and power: silver. Before coins became common, silver was often fashioned into objects of great beauty and significance. These were not just ornaments, they were a way to store and display wealth. A chieftain or a successful warrior might wear a heavy twisted silver ring around his arm or neck. These arm rings and neck rings, often called torques, were more than just jewelry. They were a public declaration of a man's worth, his success in trade, raiding, or leadership. They were a walking bank account, a visible sign of power and influence that everyone could see and understand. These objects were meticulously crafted. Silversmiths would twist, hammer, and engrave the metal, creating intricate patterns. Some rings were simple, solid bands of silver. Others were elaborate, woven designs. They were portable wealth. A man could carry his fortune on his own body. This was incredibly practical in a world that was often on the move. You couldn't easily carry a herd of cattle with you on a long sea voyage, but a heavy silver bracelet was no trouble at all. This made silver the perfect currency for a mobile, seafaring people. It was a store of value that was durable, divisible, and universally desired. The giving of rings was also a vital social ritual. A king or a chieftain would reward his loyal followers with silver rings. This was more than just a payment. It was a powerful act that forged a bond between a leader and his men. The warrior who received a ring from his lord was bound by an oath of loyalty. The ring was a symbol of that sacred promise. These acts are immortalized in the great sagas and poems of the North. They speak of ring givers, a term of high praise for a generous lord. This circulation of precious metal cemented social hierarchies and built the war bands that would come to dominate the era. Sometimes, these rings were used directly in transactions. A large, heavy arm ring might be too valuable for a small purchase. In such cases, a piece could be literally cut or hacked from the ring to pay a smaller amount. This practice points to the dual nature of these items. They were both symbols of status and a practical form of bullion. The value was in the weight and purity of the silver itself, not in the object's form. This idea of cutting up silver to make payments was a crucial step. It was a bridge between a world of barter and the concept of standardized weight-based currency. The age of the coin was drawing nearer. Denmark was not an island, cut off from the world. it was part of a vast network of trade and contact. Long before the Viking Age, the influence of a distant empire reached its shores in the form of silver. Roman coins, known as denarii, began to appear in Denmark. They traveled north along the old trade routes, passed from hand to hand, a ripple spreading from the collapse of the Roman world. These coins were not used as currency in the way we understand it. The locals didn't know or care about the face of the emperor stamped upon them. For the people of Denmark, they were simply small, convenient pieces of precious silver. These Roman coins were often treated as exotic treasures. They were items of prestige. Finding a Roman coin in a Danish grave from this period tells us something about the person buried there. They were likely someone of high status, someone connected to the long-distance trade networks. The coins were often pierced and worn as pendants or incorporated into jewelry. They were valued for their silver content and their foreign mysterious origin. They were a whisper of a powerful, organized world, symbols far to the south. A world of emperors, legions, and cities of stone, all represented by a small, shiny disc of metal. Centuries later, a new wave of silver began to arrive, this time from the east. The expansion of the Islamic caliphates created a powerful and wealthy civilization that stretched from Spain to Central Asia. These new empires minted vast quantities of silver coins, known as dirhams. Through a network of traders, many of whom were Vikings themselves, these coins flowed north. They traveled up the great rivers of Russia, across the Baltic Sea, and into the hands of Danish merchants and chieftains. Like the Roman coins before them, they were not initially used as local currency. They were a source of high-quality, pure silver. The arrival of these foreign coins had a profound effect. It injected a huge amount of silver into the Scandinavian economy. This influx of wealth helped to fuel the expansion of the Viking Age. Silver was needed to build ships, to pay warriors, and to finance trading expeditions. The Roman denarii and Islamic dirhams provided that silver. They were melted down to make the iconic rings and bracelets of the era. They were also hoarded, buried in the ground in times of trouble. The thousands of these coins found in hoards across Denmark tell a story of a society being transformed by a new and powerful form of wealth. The dawn of the Viking Age, around the late 8th century, opened a superhighway of trade and plunder between Scandinavia and the east. Vikings, known in the east as the Rus, navigated the great rivers of what is now Russia and Ukraine. They journeyed down the Volga and the Dnieper, reaching the rich markets of the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic caliphates. They traded furs, amber, walrus ivory, and slaves. In return, they received goods, spices, and silks, but most importantly, they brought back silver. They returned with a flood of Islamic dirhams, a tide of wealth that would reshape their world. These dirhams were a product of a sophisticated urban civilization. They were beautifully made, stamped with elegant Kufic script. The inscriptions declared the faith of Islam, the name of the ruler, and the mint and year of issue. To a Viking trader, the script was unreadable. The religious declarations were meaningless. What mattered was a coin's weight and the purity of its silver. The dirhams of the Samanid dynasty, minted in cities like Samarkand and Bukhara, were particularly prized. They were known to be of a consistent high quality, and they became the dominant international currency of their time, a true silver dollar of the early medieval world. The sheer quantity of this Eastern silver is staggering. Archaeologists have unearthed hundreds of thousands of Islamic coins in Scandinavia. Some hoards contain thousands of dirhams, a king's ransom buried for safekeeping. This wasn't just a trickle of foreign treasure, it was a torrent. This wealth was the engine of the Viking Age. It allowed chieftains to attract followers, build fleets of longships, and project their power. The desire for more silver, for silver as they called it, drove much of the Viking expansion, whether through peaceful trade or violent raiding. The dirham was the prize that lured them ever further from their homelands. This influx of silver also changed how people thought about wealth. It was no longer just about land or cattle. Wealth was now portable, measurable, and international. A man's fortune could be counted in coins and weighed on a scale. It accustomed the people of Denmark to the idea of using small, regular units of silver in transactions. While the dirhams themselves were not a local currency, their presence paved the way for one. They got people used to the feel of silver coins in their hands. They were a foreign import, but they planted the seed of a revolutionary idea. A standardized, homegrown Danish currency. The massive quantities of silver, especially Islamic dirhams, pouring into Denmark created a new and practical way of doing business. This was the age of hacksilver, or hacksilver. The principle was simple: the value of the silver was in its weight, not its form. So, if a Viking needed to buy something, he would take a silver object, be it a coin, a piece of an armband, or an ingot, and literally hack off a piece of the required weight. A small portable set of scales, which are often found in Viking graves, became an essential tool for any merchant or trader. Commerce became a constant process of cutting, weighing, and exchanging. This was a brilliantly pragmatic system. It was a bullion economy. It didn't matter if the silver was a coin from Baghdad, a bracelet from Gotland, or a piece of a Roman platter. Silver was silver. This meant that silver from any source could be used in trade. It created a flexible and universal system that perfectly suited the Viking world. A warrior could return from a raid with a silver goblet, cut it into pieces, and use it to buy a new sword, food for his family, or land. It transformed looted treasures and foreign currency into a liquid asset that could be used in everyday life. The practice of hacking up silver tells us a lot about the Viking mindset. They were unsentimental about these beautiful objects. A finely crafted Islamic coin, a work of art in its own right, was just a convenient source of metal. It would be snipped and cut without a second thought. Archaeologists regularly find hoards containing a mixture of whole coins, coin fragments, chopped up jewelry, and ingots, all jumbled together. This was the Viking equivalent of a wallet, a collection of different denominations ready to be weighed out for any purchase. It was a rough and ready system, but it worked. The hack-silver economy was a crucial step towards native coinage. It established the principle of a weight-based currency. People became accustomed to the idea that a certain weight of silver had a specific purchasing power. The next logical step was to pre-cut and mark those pieces of silver to guarantee their weight and quality. This would save everyone the trouble of having to weigh every single fragment for every single transaction. The stage was set for a ruler to take control of this process, to put his own stamp on the silver, and in doing so, to create Denmark's very first coins. The chaos of hacksilver was about to give way to the order of a royal mint. The moment of creation came in the early 9th century, in a bustling, chaotic, and incredibly important place, Hedeby. Located at the southern base of the Jutland Peninsula, Hedeby was the great trading hub of the Viking world. It was a crossroads where traders from the Frankish Empire to the south, the Slavic lands to the east, and the Scandinavian homelands to the north all met. It was a melting pot of cultures, languages, and goods, and it was here, amidst the clamor of the market, that the first coins were struck in the land that would become Denmark. These were the first Danish pennies, or penninge. These earliest coins were not grand statements of royal power. They were, in fact, imitations of the coins of a neighboring superpower, the Carolingian Empire of Charlemagne. The Frankish deniers were a stable and trusted currency, and the early minters at Hedeby copied their designs. This was a clever move. By making their coins look like a currency that people already knew and trusted, they increased the chances that their own coins would be accepted in trade. The designs were often crude, featuring stylized ships, animals, or geometric patterns. They were a local product, designed for use in the thriving marketplace of Hedeby. The silver for these coins came from the vast quantities flowing into Scandinavia. It was the same silver that was being used for hacksilver and arm rings, melted down and reformed into these new standardized units. Early coins can be divided into different types, often named after the images on them. One of the most famous is the ship type, which shows a stylized Viking longship on one side. Another shows a deer, perhaps connected to the royal Frankish hunting parks. These simple images were the first symbols of a local authority taking control of the currency, moving beyond the random chaos of the hacksilver system. For the first time, people in a Danish town could trade using standardized pieces of silver that did not need to be weighed for every transaction. This was a revolution. It made commerce faster, easier, and more efficient. It oiled the wheels of the great trading machine that was Hedeby. While these early coins were anonymous, they didn't bear the name of a king. They represented a monumental shift. They were the first step away from a bullion economy and towards a true monetary system. The idea of a Danish coin was born, and it was an idea that would be seized upon and transformed by the kings who were to come. The scattered anonymous coinage of Hedeby was a beginning, but the next great leap forward came with a king who was determined to unite Denmark under his rule. Harold Bluetooth. In the mid-10th century, Harold embarked on a mission to consolidate his power, Christianize his people, and create a unified kingdom. One of the most powerful tools he used to achieve this was coinage. He understood that controlling the currency meant controlling the economy, and that putting his mark on a coin was a powerful way to project his authority across the land. He was the first Danish king to systematically issue coins bearing his own name. Harold's coins were a radical departure from the earlier Hedeby issues. They were known as korsmønter, or cross coins, and for good reason. On one side, they featured a prominent Christian cross. This was a clear and deliberate political statement. Harold, who famously made the Danes Christian as his Jellingstone proclaims, was using his currency to spread the new faith. Every time someone used one of his coins, they were holding a symbol of the new religion and a reminder of the king's power and piety. The coin was no longer just a piece of silver, it was a piece of royal and religious propaganda. On the other side of the coin, a simple inscription often named the king and the mint location, such as Harold Rex, King Harold. This was revolutionary. It directly linked the coin to a specific ruler. It was a guarantee of the coin's weight and silver content, backed by the full authority of the king. This built trust in the currency and allowed it to circulate more widely than the old, anonymous pennies. Harold established mints not just in Hedeby, but in other important centers like Roskilde and Lund, extending his economic control across his newly unified kingdom. His coins were a tool of state building. This move was about more than just economics, it was about ideology. By issuing these coins, Harold was behaving like the other great Christian kings of Europe. He was adopting the symbols and practices of a powerful, established civilization. It was a way of showing that Denmark was no longer a collection of pagan pirate nests, but a respectable, organized Christian kingdom with a rightful place among the nations of Europe. The silver coin, once a simple tool for trade, had been transformed into a powerful symbol of a king's ambition and the birth of a nation. It was a small object that carried a very big message. After Harold Bluetooth, the die was cast. Danish kings understood the power of coinage, and for the next several centuries, the history of Denmark's silver coins is a story of the kingdom's own fortunes. Kings like Svein Forkbeard and Knut the Great, who built a vast North Sea empire, issued coins in both Denmark and England. Their coins were a symbol of this international power. The designs were often of a high artistic quality, influenced by Anglo-Saxon styles. A coin minted in Lund might look very similar to one minted in London, a clear statement of a single unified rule over a great empire. The Middle Ages brought constant change. The quality and silver content of the coins often fluctuated wildly. In times of strength and prosperity, kings would issue heavy, pure silver coins. In times of war or economic hardship, they would often debase the currency, mixing the silver with cheaper metals like copper. This would allow the king to mint more coins from the same amount of silver, but it would also lead to inflation and a loss of public trust. People would hoard the old pure coins and try to pass off the debased ones. The state of a kingdom's coins became a direct reflection of the health of the kingdom itself. Artistically, the coins evolved. The simple crosses of Harold Bluetooth gave way to more elaborate designs. Portraits of the king, often highly stylized, became common. These were not realistic likenesses, but symbols of royal majesty. They were joined by heraldic symbols, coats of arms, and other emblems of a growing national identity. The Renaissance brought a new level of artistry and realism to coin design. Influenced by the classical ideals sweeping across Europe, coins became miniature works of art, celebrating the power and prestige of the monarch and the kingdom with ever greater sophistication. These changes mattered deeply. A stable, reliable currency was essential for trade and economic growth. Merchants needed to trust that the coins they received were worth their stated value. For the common person, the coin in their pocket was their connection to the wider economy and the state. The images on the coins were often the only portrait of the king they would ever see. The coin was a tangible link to a distant ruler, a daily reminder of who was in charge. The journey of the Danish silver coin from a simple tool to a complex political and economic instrument mirrored the journey of Denmark itself, from a Viking chiefdom to a modern nation-state. The Industrial Revolution in the 19th century brought about the most significant changes to Danish coinage in 1,000 years. New steam-powered minting technology allowed for the mass production of coins with a previously unimaginable level of precision and uniformity. This was the end of the hammered coin and the dawn of the modern machine-milled currency. In 1875, Denmark, along with Sweden and Norway, formed the Scandinavian Monetary Union. This landmark agreement established a new currency, the krone and krona, which was based on a gold standard. Silver was relegated to a secondary role, used for smaller denomination coins. The 20th century saw the gradual disappearance of precious metal from everyday currency. The immense cost of 2 world wars and the instability of global markets led governments, including Denmark's, to abandon the gold and silver standards. Coins that were once made of pure silver were now minted from cheaper, more durable alloys like copper-nickel. Silver, the metal that had been the very definition of money for millennia, became too valuable to be used in coins for daily transactions. The krone, once a specific weight of gold or silver, became a fiat currency, its value guaranteed only by the government and the central bank. Today, the Danish krone exists as a modern, stable currency. The coins are practical and functional, designed for use in vending machines and daily commerce. They still bear the mark of the monarch, a tradition stretching all the way back to Harold Bluetooth. The portrait of the reigning queen or king on one side, and national symbols, like the crown or hearts from the coat of arms, on the other, maintain that ancient link between the currency and the state. But the material itself is no longer precious. The value is symbolic, a shared public trust in the Danish economy, rather than the intrinsic worth of the metal. The journey of Danish coinage is a story of transformation. It began with the raw, intrinsic value of silver, weighed out in a bustling Viking market. It became a tool of kings, a symbol of national identity, and an engine of empire. Today, it has completed its journey from substance to symbol. The silver itself is gone from the coins in our pockets, but its legacy remains. The very idea of a coin, a standardized, state-guaranteed unit of value, is a direct descendant of those first crude pennies struck in Hedeby and the royal cross coins of Harold Bluetooth. The silver has vanished, but the revolution it started is still with us.